So one of the movements that we're going to look at now that's essential for moving over this natural terrain, over slippy rocks, hard surfaces, rough terrain, is crawling, using all four limbs in coordination with each other to navigate often slippy or rough terrains. Crawling, just like climbing, is another one of our fundamental natural movement patterns as human beings that's been utilised since our time here on earth began, and one of the natural movement patterns that we go through reflexly as babies to help develop the communication between the two sides of the body and also the two sides of the brain, the two hemispheres of the brain, to develop this coordination of all of our body parts to give us good coordination, spatial awareness, balance and proprioception, this body awareness sense. So the first crawling pattern that we're going to look at is one that can be used over any terrain, whether it's slippy rocks or over rivers, waterfalls, logs, or also hard or rough terrain as well. So to start with, just go into the position of a crawling pattern. So we want our hands and feet, and just leave your knees on the ground for the minute, because what we want to do is to make sure that when we go into this crawling position that we don't round our backs. We want to maintain the lumbar lordosis at the bottom of the spine, maintain the three curves in the neutral position of the spine while we're going into this crawling pattern. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're just going to go up onto our hands. You can have your hands flat on the floor or on your fists if that's more comfortable for you. Hands flat on the floor or in that position, and then what we're going to do is just lift our knees off the floor, which immediately starts to engage the core muscles and hold you in that body tension. And again, when we go into this position, we want to make sure that we're not rounding the back, that we're maintaining a nice neutral spine and holding ourselves in this position. Now this position for some people will be quite difficult to start with, so it's something that you've got to work up to over the days, weeks and months to prepare your body and condition your body for this sort of movement. Once you've got this position and you're sort of comfortable in this position, what we're going to start to do is lift each one of the limbs off the floor, which helps develop balance and coordination of all the limbs, and also make us interact with our centre of gravity so that we know where we are in time and space, which develops a sense called proprioception, which scientists are now calling the sixth sense, the body position sense of where we are in time and space, which again makes it more difficult and engages the core much more. And again, this may take some time to develop if this is a new movement pattern for you. The next thing that we're going to do is to lift two limbs off the floor at once, so one hand and the opposite side of the body, which creates this crawling pattern. So then just start to move from one hand to the other. So I've got the right hand off the floor and the left leg off the floor, and just rock back between the two. And then alternate that, so that we're actually starting to develop this crawling pattern between the cross patterned fascias and muscles of the body. Because crawling is a cross motor movement that uses one limb and the opposite limb for its efficiency. So just develop these movements slowly, which also helps to develop the fascial spring mechanism or the elastic recoil mechanism into the body. So it gives us this ability to spring and puts a spring back into our movements, which scientists are now realising has much more importance on maintaining musculoskeletal health and movement. Once we start to get these fundamental skills, we can then start to actually develop the coordination and movements for crawling. So basically taking one limb and the opposite limb forward into a crawling pattern, and then swapping over and doing the same on the other side. Now we can do this forwards and backwards, so that if you've only got limited space, you can literally just crawl forwards and backwards and develop this crawling pattern in a limited space. Again, maintaining a neutral spine, make sure that we're not rounding the spine. And this is a brilliant exercise for developing core integration, but in a more natural way. And it's a brilliant workout as well. In 2018, crawling was considered to be the new plank because it activates and engages the core just as much, but actually in a more natural way that's in keeping with how we used to move as human beings over this natural terrain. So switching on the core muscles, switching on the proprioceptive system of the body, and developing this cross-patterned coordination and brain integration as well. So as we further progress and develop these movements, as well as the small little movements of the hands and the feet, we also want to make sure that the legs got the flexibility and ability to come up past the hands to
give us the ability to move over any terrain that we might encounter. So whether it's over a rock or a log, so we can start to bring the legs up further to give the flexibility to the hips, externally rotating and opening the hips, and also further working the dynamics and spiral movements of the spine to help mobility and that natural efficiency of the spinal movements, and naturally rotating the thorax and the pelvis, which help to mobilise and move the spinal vertebra and develop this spiral movement of the spine itself. So that when you do encounter a rough terrain, that your body's got the proprioception, the balance, the coordination and the tone to be able to move over that natural terrain efficiently.